Hi, this is Rachel, and welcome to a short introduction to course design to solve a specific classroom challenge that you're working on. So, I just want to start with some resources that you might find useful. If you do want to just click on the links here, you can go ahead and go to our Google Drive and get this PowerPoint there, or just simply search for the links online. That works too. So here's what we're going to work on today, um, and a variety of different things, but the big overarching idea or learning outcome is to apply backwards design to develop a guided inquiry exercise to address a common teaching challenge. And then the other three are within the context of that main learning outcome. So introducing big ideas of course design, looking at a couple of examples of active learning. And of course, we already looked at the resources, but I'll use those repeatedly throughout this short introduction. So when we met as a group, the first thing that we did was we did a 5-minute write about common teaching challenges and what we wanted to focus on during the conversation. And so we came up with this Padlet. You can go to Padlet and look at this look at what we put if you want to. Uh, it's a great way to get students to share things. It is anonymous, or can be anonymous, um, and you can get feedback from a group of people pretty easily using it. So we came up with a variety of different ideas and ended up selecting this set of problems to focus on after we put the different ideas on Padlet, kind of group those as something that was a group that sort of made sense, um, and then uh, um, and then that was the most popular option. So that's what we focused on. So when we think about course design, there are 3 different stages of it, and you can see they're all connected. Sometimes people use the term course design or backwards design. Sometimes it's integrated course design. That's a common one that I'll refer to. And there is an extensive workbook from DFINC online if you're interested in going through the steps of this in quite a bit more detail. Um, so we start with learning outcomes. That's usually the first piece that we start with. And then design the feedback and assessment and also the activities, both in the class and outside of the class, to align with those learning goals. So the sense is that students know what the expectation is for them to learn. We are doing activities that support that learning, and then we check in with them to make sure that they're actually learning that and approaching their goals. So when we were in our group, we used a low-tech clicker question where the attendees could simply show me using their fingers which one of these statements best applied to them, and you of course can do that yourself. But in the classroom, it's very simple to have students respond to questions using this 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 format. Um, it's also possible to use smartphones like through Quizlet to do the same sort of thing. And there are still some, I think, formal actual clickers floating around which look a little bit like remote controls. So it's a very quick way of of just asking students what they're thinking and getting a multiple choice type answer, or asking them to go ahead and answer a question, a content-based question, so that you can see how students are tracking what you're doing in the class. So we start with learning outcomes. It's at the top of that pyramid. And you might use the SMART acronym. This is CALMS here. They both are really similar. There's a lot of overlap between the two. And the idea for writing learning outcomes is that you're really specific about what the student should actually be learning. And so you're not using a lot of vague terms like understand that you can't measure. and is kind of vague, and instead using really specific terms like design or explain or outline or calculate. And you can see that sometimes we write learning outcomes so that we're making sure to address different levels of Bloom taxonomy, or both DFINC and the backwards design folks also include caring and a human dimension and learning how to learn dimension, both so that students do some reflection and have some metacognition, and that's an important part of the learning process, and also so that empathy can be introduced into the learning outcomes, and other things, other of those sort of intangibles that that really might connect with the core reasons that we do teach. So here are some examples of those more empathy-based, human dimension caring-based learning outcomes. So as a group, we did a Think, Pair, Share activity where we converted our problem into learning outcomes. So each individual first wrote down their ideas for learning outcomes based on the problem or statement of the problem. And then pairs of faculty compared their outcomes. And then we put our favorite ones, are the ones that we wanted to include on our template, our learning activity template that we'll look at in a few minutes. We put it up, they put them up there. And so we had them kind of as the clear learning outcomes for the activity. So one thing to note is that in the learning activity, which we're going to look at in a few minutes, it's really just a piece of the whole semester. And so the skills and the outcomes that we identified are not the sort of thing that we could completely solve or address or overcome in just one lesson. It would take the entire semester of lessons to work on that. And so we focused on developing the first lesson. So let's go ahead and turn to assessment and the learning activities. So oftentimes we kind of separate these where feedback and assessment really just refers broadly to maybe summative assessment activities that we're going to do, or also the formative ones. But teaching and learning activities also provide an opportunity for formative assessment and figuring out what your students are doing. And that's what we're going to focus on here. You've probably had practice writing summative assessments like quizzes and tests. And those are useful to look at too. But the formative piece that we get from our in-class activities is really what is more important here. Just to put this up here, just to make sure that we're all on the same page when I say formative and summative. These are some definitions. So far in this introduction, I've put up some slides and told you about some of the formative assessments that might be useful to do in a classroom. They're super quick, just to see where students are doing, how they're doing. So 5-minute rates, clicker questions, think, pair, shares. Those are all example of formative assessment. I'm not going to grade it, but it's a good chance to check in and see where students are. And they really are a part of all parts of the learning process. So whether you're trying to find out what students already know, or whether you're trying to introduce a new content, or whether you're trying to allow them time to reflect and to think about what they've learned, those CATs can be really useful. And if you are interested in learning more about them, we do have workshops here at the Teaching and Learning Center that you are invited to. All right, so a little bit more about the learning activity that we're going to develop. So sometimes we talk about teachers being sage on the stage. and doing lecture or large group discussion. And those are really teacher-focused strategies. Everybody's looking at the teacher, and the teacher is the one who's who's doing most of the talking, like me right now. On the other hand, we have very student-focused strategies, which are also important, especially when we think about independent research and internships. Those are really important parts of somebody's education, but they're quite student-focused. And so what we're focusing on is somewhere in the middle, which is where we do some guided inquiry. In other words, a teacher directs the learning, but the student is the one who is actually learning the material and doing the work. So that's what we worked on, is a guided inquiry workshop to address our learning outcomes. And if you want to see it, and also if you would like to use the template, you're certainly welcome to do that. It is in our Google Drive, and there is one more short video that you could have a look at if you're interested in it, where I go over the template and look at how to design it. Just to end though, I should have put this up before. These are the learning outcomes that we came up with for our guided inquiry exercise. All right, well, thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great day.